We'll go ahead and kick things off. So welcome everyone to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I am a senior dream curator here at DreamBank. On behalf of the team, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here. As we get started, we always like to ask where people are joining in from and encourage you to share so in the comments if you are comfortable in doing so. A couple other housekeeping items too, again, we very much appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us here, and you made the conscious effort to join us. So AJ is going to be talking about several different concepts and ideas, and encouragement is encouraged. Asking questions, I'm sure, is encouraged. So please go ahead and use the chat function to do so. We'll make sure those questions get relayed. But a little bit about DreamBank for those of you who aren't familiar. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why DreamBank was created. It's an inspirational community destination and digital experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, overcome obstacles, and to stay motivated. I'll go ahead and I'll link a few other relevant items in the chat too, some of our upcoming events, so that you can kind of peruse those, and then as well as our catalog of all of our past events that we've recorded and uploaded to YouTube. But let me go ahead and introduce our featured speaker today, AJ Cruz. So AJ is the concept illustrator at HumanWorks. AJ needs to make things make sense, not only for himself, but also for you as well. This quality, along with his knack for joining backstage design and front stage presentation, has guided him through a dynamic professional career that began in elementary education and has continued in organizational development. After making the leap to corporate education, AJ led learning and development at 2 Milwaukee area businesses before embarking with 3 remarkable colleagues to launch HumanWorks. Thank you so much for joining us, AJ. I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be back at DreamBank, Andy. So thank you, and thank everyone at DreamBank. That's how I'd like to get started today, with a little bit of gratitude, not just for the opportunity to be back, but the opportunity to interact with all of you. So welcome. Thanks for being part of the conversation. My name's AJ Cruz. I'm the concept illustrator at HumanWorks, which you just heard about a moment ago. We're a Milwaukee, Wisconsin-based consultancy, and we're focused on building sustainable people practices with all of our clients. So today, the conversation is going to be all about questions. And I want to make sure I get my slide. I've got some visuals to sort of share with all of you. So making a few clicks, let me know if that's up and running. Is that sort of coming through that way?
Looking good.
Fantastic, thanks. So I'm just doing a few clicks to make sure that I can see all of the things that you may or may not be chatting my way as well. So that's kind of the setup for today. As far as any ground rule goes, it's all about questions, everyone. So welcome from wherever you're tuning in from. But I really hope that you feel emboldened to speak up or use the chat function and feature to interject and ask your own questions as we go through the conversation today. Sort of sound good, everybody? Hopefully ready to rock and roll and sort of talk about the power of questions. But I have to tell you all something before we get started, something very important. This workshop will have sort of absolutely no answers. That's the thing. There's going to be questions, lots of questions. I have no answers for you today. So you might be used to seeing a Q&A, and you might, it's sort of a little weird to have the Q without the A, but what I'm really hoping I can do in our conversation today is really just focus you all and get you energized around questions that are going to build that energy for you, both personally and professionally. Excuse me. So that's really one thing that I'm looking toward doing. Secondly, I want to give you a handful of questions that you can walk away and that can be useful to you leaving our conversation today. That's really important to me. So besides giving you energy, I want to give you something that's very useful to you. You can take away and work with it. Last but not least, I really want to get you thinking, and this is sort of a big idea today. I really want to get you thinking about the power of a question versus the need to always try to have the right answer. That's sort of the other side of questions, right? We said there's going to be no answers today. Well, I want you to think about the power of a question versus always having to have the right answer. So Everybody ready to dive in, have a dialogue with me about questions? So if you're ready to go, I don't see anybody as far as the screen goes, but I know I've got the chat. So if you're ready to go, I've already seen we've got people coming from Wisconsin, coming from Georgia, coming from South Carolina. Sort of exciting to have you all here from all over the place. If you're ready to rock and roll, I'm going to put 3 questions in your head to get you thinking today. The first question that's going to carry with us all the way through our conversation is, what makes a question powerful? The second question that's going to carry through our conversation today is, do you ever feel the need to be right? And finally, the third question that's going to carry through our conversation today is, what does it really mean to be curious? You can't really talk about asking questions without talking about being curious. So I want you to keep all 3 of those ideas in your mind today as we go, because they're all going to come up again. I would assume, though, you're all here and you're all part of this conversation because you have some personal sort of value around the idea of asking. And I've got to tell you, I've been very fortunate since joining the world of business and working on business. I've been very fortunate to be around people and to be around organizations that really, truly value this idea. In fact, what you're seeing right now, this word ask, that's one of 6 values of the first organization I worked for in the world of business. This was one of their core values. It was just ask. It wasn't just something that was welcome. It was something that was expected. So I really sort of, that resonated with me. I clammed onto that because to me, that really echoed well with a personal core value of mine that I call talk it through. So that's one of my personal core values. I have to talk it through. That's where I do my asking. And so to be a part of an organization that expected that from me really felt near and dear and close and made me believe I need to be myself here. I need to do that here. Since joining HumanWorks and having the privilege to work with other organizations around their culture and their values, either building core values with them as the foundation of their culture or refining the core values they have to be more in step and more in line with who they are and actionable and all those wonderful things, I've had the chance to meet some organizations that also have the value of ask. One of those organizations we've worked with is over on the left-hand side of your screen. That's Myron Construction. And at Myron, they think big. So that's one of their core values. That's where they do their asking. To them, it's all about innovative thinking and challenging the status quo. On the other side, on the right side, you see an organization we work with called BVK that was all about be curious. That was one of their values. They expected that from everyone. That's where people brought their questions. So I believe fundamentally that every organization needs to have a value around ask. So my first question to you that I'm hoping to get some feedback either in the chat or on mute and shout out is, do you have a personal core value that you see as sort of around ask, or do you have an organizational core value for the organization that you work with that you think really connects well to this idea of asking questions? Just looking at the chat, I'll give you all a second to think about that. Not seeing any reaction yet, but think about it. If you have a personal value, if you have an organizational value around ask, I'd love to hear it. Oh, Leona, thanks. Active listening, for sure. Oh, okay. Sarah, thanks. Gave it away. Sarah, a member of my team, is on, so you can see that there. And if you're looking at our core values across the bottom of our screen, I was going to quiz you all and say, which HumanWorks core value do you think is around ask? Well, Sarah answered it for you. It's right there. It's wonder, but I'm seeing some other thoughts come through. So thanks so much. Talk it through camp. Thanks, Victoria. You and I can hang out there. That's where I do all my asking. Strive to maintain a growth mindset. I think that's that innovative side of ask. Love it. Every individual, for sure. That means every voice, right? Jennifer, every individual, every voice is so important. And Lynn, don't make assumptions. Oh no, we better ask the question, better not make assumptions. I think assumptions is going to come up a little bit later in our conversation. In fact, I'm going to take us there now. I've got to tell you, excuse me, just a little bit more about my professional relationship with the idea of asking questions. I mentioned my first job in the world of business, and you're seeing that ask value on the screen in front of you, everyone. But I didn't tell you about my career before the world of business, which was being a professional educator. So I went to school, I went through college to teach children. So I plan to be a professional educator. And let me tell you what, when you plan to be a professional educator, they teach you everything about asking questions. Oh my gosh, there's an entire rule book on it. The only redeeming part of that is the rule book comes with pictures. So anybody familiar with what they're seeing now, this Bloom's taxonomy, have you ever seen that before, ever heard that before? This is maybe a simple version of it. It's kind of a version that I like that way. But if you've seen Bloom's taxonomy before, you know it's all about cognitive function. Think of it like mental horsepower. And if I was going to ask you to remember something or recall something like, hey, when was the War of 1812? I tried to pick the easiest thing I could, I promise. Remembering something like that is probably requires, according to Bloom's taxonomy, the lowest amount of horsepower as far as that goes. Oh, good. Substitute teacher on board with me. So Deb, welcome. Deborah, thanks for chiming in. And then if I asked you to create something, if I asked you to come up, use all the information you have to synthesize something or make something new and create, I would be asking for the highest level of mental horsepower that you have to offer as far as that goes. So yes, when I went to school to become a teacher, I was definitely taught how to ask questions all the way up and down Bloom's taxonomy. But you know what I wasn't especially taught? I wasn't especially taught how to get children to ask questions. So I wasn't really taught about that. And maybe that's because children are sort of question asking machines. They are. One study I looked up said that the average 4-year-old asks between 200 and 300 questions a day. So maybe a question for all of you is how many questions have you asked today? I want you all to think about that one and actually throw a number into chat or unmute and chime in. How many questions do you think you've asked someone else today? More than 10, less than 10? Andy, you're in the lead right now, okay. Deborah said 10 to 15. Andrew said you've asked 150 questions. You're nearing that 5-year-old level, which is pretty powerful. Oh, 3, Sarah, don't be bashful, don't be shy. 3 might be more than someone else. 15, less than 10. Oh, Victoria, yeah, the Montessori model would definitely push you to be a strong question asker. Love that. Actually, at HumanWorks, we get to work directly with a Montessori Academy right here in Milwaukee. Gotten to know a lot about that model that way. Out loud, not nearly as many as in your head. So Jennifer, I relate to that as well. The book, and I have one book recommendation for you all today. I'm going to hold it up and I'll say its name and the author. It's A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. So A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. I recommend it to all of you. Wonderful, wonderful book. In that book, Warren Berger says between the ages of 2 and 5, the average child asks around 40,000 questions. It's a lot of questions. Maybe depending on how you grew up, depending on how you went through school, maybe you're more inclined to ask more, but I doubt that all of us get to that 200 to 300 questions a day. So what does it really mean to be curious? Well, Einstein said this, everyone. Einstein said I'm not really especially talented. I have no special talents, but I'm only passionately curious. So maybe being truly curious means asking 200 to 300 questions a day, like a 4-year-old. And maybe it also means caring about the answer. There's that assumption part before. Did you ever notice children at that age who ask all those questions? They don't assume. So I know assuming came up before. They don't assume. At least I don't see that in the children that I've worked with either. They just ask. So there's power in asking, everyone. But back to this idea of what it means to be curious, asking that many questions a day. Here's my next question for all of you. Why do we lose that part of our nature? That's my next question. Think about that for a moment. And I'd love to hear reactions, thoughts that way. Why do adults tend to lose that part of their nature? And by the way, if you're an adult who hasn't lost that part of your nature, bravo, keep it, don't let it go. That's what today's conversation is all about. So why do we lose that part of our nature? What do you think? Thanks for responding, Jennifer. Thanks for your thoughts. You're saying maybe it's a bad experience. Someone shut us down or sort of turned us off to questions. Could we have been squashed? Oh, okay. I hear about Lupa. I hear about maybe a school experience where, yes, indeed, that idea was squashed. Oh, or even a question could be a challenging or perceived as challenges, maybe unwelcome challenges for that matter. Just chat. Go ahead. Did I hear someone join? Do you have a thought? Or maybe an accidental background noise, that can happen too. Great. You're all sort of going there with me. I think sometimes I always challenge a group of adults around this, say, raise your hand if you think you know all the right answers. And I'll tell you, no hands go up in the room of adults. Nobody says, I know all the answers. So we don't lose that part of our nature because we know all the answers. But I do think, and some of you are alluding to some of the reasons why, maybe that's been squashed because maybe, just maybe, we start to, or we're taught to value answers over questions. So that's my next question to all of you. Which one is more valuable? Questions or answers? Love some of the chat that I see going back and forth. Thanks for keeping that conversation going. But here's my question to you. Which one's more value, questions or answers? If you had to invest stock in questions or in answers, which one would you invest your stock in as far as that goes? Which one would have the highest rate of return? What do you think? You're going to invest. I'll give you the Bitcoin or whatever you're going to invest. I'll give it to you. You invest it. Which one's going to have the highest rate of return? I'm seeing some vote for questions and questions that are open-ended. Love that. See that idea. Everyone, let me talk you through this just a little bit. Have you noticed that knowledge and known answers, knowledge is kind of a commodity? Knowledge has really become just that, just a commodity. If you don't believe me, just ask Siri or Google or Alexa. They'll tell you, they'll answer. Knowledge is known answers. They're all around us. But when you have a commodity like known answers, what happens to that commodity over time? Well, you see the visualization here. That commodity can depreciate. Now, what I don't want to say is I don't want to say that there aren't some answers in this world and universe that remain consistently valuable, those answers that stay the same. Sure, they exist, they do. But when you think about life, when you think about the work that you're all doing in your own world, those known answers tend to depreciate over time. Why? Because they tend to change. When we know something, sometimes over time, that tends to change. It tends to evolve. So on one hand, you've got this commodity sort of devaluing over time. And on the other hand, you have questions who are actually the catalyst or the reason that those answers are devaluing, because the right question can lead to a new answer and maybe a better answer than we've had before. So right now, we can look at this, we can understand it, we could agree with it and say, oh yeah, okay, this is elementary, AJ. Questions, the right question, open-ended questions, strong questions, they appreciate and value over time, and known answers can change for the most part. So I hear what you're saying, but we can know it, but do we behave and act and think that way? That's the challenging part, everyone, that human nature tends to probably, and some experiences that we have in life tend to probably overvalue answers and undervalue questions. And that shows up in our actions as we take actions in our lifetime. So the next question I have for you here, why is that? Why do leaders at work, us at work, even parents or teachers at home in life interacting with others, what do we tend to do rather than ask questions? One person said, assume early on in that conversation. I heard that. We might tend to assume that could happen. What else do we tend to do? Isn't it sometimes a little safer just not to ask? Is it safer not to ask? We tend to give answers as guardrails, Deborah. Thanks for that. For sure. We tend to guide and sort of show this is the way, this is how I want you to go. Here's my answer. It's a guardrail. It's the rule that way. I hear you. I agree. I think we do that. Isn't it sometimes easier, speaking of guardrails, to ask questions when we feel like we're in a position of control? We do that. Leaders do that. Parents, teachers, we can sometimes do that. I'm willing to ask a question as long as that question is inside a frame of control. So in other words, if I'm in an interview, easy to ask questions. I'm in control. If I'm leading that interview as far as that goes, easy. If someone else has made a mistake, it's easy for me to feel like I'm in control to ask questions around that mistake because I know what should have happened. Maybe I'm the authority in that situation and I can steer or guide you back onto the right spot. Leona, making decisions without all the information. Yeah, I think we tend to do that as well. And maybe it has to do with this. You've heard of maybe you haven't heard of this. Let me just share it. I think sometimes we do that kind of questioning because we have that need to be right, that control factor. Maybe you've heard of this. You're familiar with fear of not know or fear of missing out, fear, FOMO, fear of missing out. This is being in a funk. That's what I call it. It's the fear of not knowing. And I do think we tend to overvalue our answers, undervalue questions when we sort of get into this funk, if you will, everyone. If you're in a funk, if you have that fear of not knowing, a couple things that I want you to think about. When you're in a funk, when you have that fear of not knowing, or when you feel only comfortable asking questions, when you know the answers or it helps you control something, I want to ask you all this, and I'm really going to pause here, give you time to answer and think through this. If you're not open to questions, and I saw that come up earlier about being challenged and crossing that, sort of rocking the boat border there. So I just saw that in the chat too. But if you're not open to questions, what does that say to others? Think about that, sort of react to that way, everyone. If you're not open to questions, what does it say? Great, Deborah. So it could say stubborn. I saw that come through. So stubborn could mean to me, Sarah, I always think I have the right answer. If I'm not open to questions, I always think I'm sort of stubborn. I've got the right answer already. I don't need to be questioned that way. Maybe that's a little authoritarian too, Linda, thanks. That you don't value the input of others. Yeah, you're not open, to being questioned or challenged, or you're not open to new ideas and new thoughts that way. And maybe, of course, that afraid of being wrong, sort of that, hey, is this going to be constructive? Yeah, I see that coming through too. Thanks, David. I think there are a lot of roadblocks, a lot of bumps, a lot of challenges, everyone. When we're not open to questions, what do we create? Even if it's only an impression, what impression do we create around others? So if we have that fear of not knowing, afraid to be wrong, if we're not open to being questioned or challenged, or at least we're giving that idea off, and always thinking that we have the right answer, being a little rigid around that, sure. So what about I don't know? What's so scary about I don't know? We have this fear of not knowing, but what's so scary about I don't know, everyone? Well, let me rephrase that into a more positive light. What good could come from saying I don't know? Maybe you've thought this through. What good can come from saying I don't know? Thanks, I'm just reading along with the chat. Victoria, thanks, reading through your comment now. Oh yeah, if you sort of say, oh, you should know this, you should be an expert on that. Oh, it might be scary to say I don't know in that situation, but if you do say I don't know, what good can come from it? Oliver, I see vulnerability. I see the opportunity to learn something new, opens the floor to troubleshooting. You're all leaning, Matt, see that people start to trust you, create a little trust. My first thought around what value can be added, what good can come from saying I don't know is, could you, by saying I don't know, create a culture where that's valued? Create a culture where it is good to get it out in the open, on the floor, and question one another. back to that first value I showed you, ask, that's exactly what the owners of that organization wanted and expected from their people. They wanted it all out in the open, all open to debate and conversation. That's why they made ask a core value. They wanted that culture. And if you're willing to say, I don't know, especially you're in a role of leadership, or you're maybe in the midst of starting something new and heading something up, that I don't know can be really valuable. That's one thought. Another thought that I have that I want to share with all of you is, if you can identify within your family or your team or your organization and business a question that doesn't have an answer to it, how valuable is that? If your organization or your team has identified a question that doesn't have an answer to it, what comes next? What does that lead to? Doesn't it lead to a solution for that question? Doesn't it lead to effort and energy being put around solving that question? And isn't that incredibly valuable to a business? It goes without saying, maybe, that questions really are the power that spark innovation. So we've covered curiosity, we've covered the need to be right, but what's the real power of a question? Part of it is sparking innovation, of course. And if your business wants to be at the top, or if you want to be at the top of a solution or a new idea, identify a problem that hasn't been answered yet and find a new or different solution to it. That's an oversimplification. It sounds really easy, everyone. And if you're doubting that just a simple question can be the spark to something completely new, I do want to take you through a few examples. And you accidentally shortly saw one of the answers to that first question is, I'm going to give you a few questions. I want you to sort of react or think about what business idea was sparked. And my first question was going to be, what if we could paint over our mistakes? What if we could paint over our mistakes? Well, that's the question that sort of sparked the thinking around liquid paper quite a while ago, actually. So thank goodness for Betty Neesmith Graham, who sort of asked that question and came up with that idea. So here's another one. This one I won't show you in advance, so no sneak peek this time. Here's a question that sparked an innovation that we're all living with today. What if a video rental company were run more like a health club? So I want you to think about that. What if a video rental company were run more like a health club? What business, what innovation, what business do you think was sparked by that question? Oh, great answers coming through already. You got it. You got it. It wasn't about how much. Don't pay per rental. You rent as many as you want. Just pay your monthly subscription fee. How about that? What about this question? Why do we have to wait for a picture? Why do we have to wait for a picture? Any thoughts on what business or what innovation? Oh yeah, Victoria, Sarah, quick on the draw, you guys, you got it. In fact, that question, everybody, was actually, Daddy, why do we have to wait for a picture? It was actually Edwin Land's daughter, I think, who asked the question one day at the beach. And you all know the result. Here's another question. This one, a little, maybe a different sort of angle. Why aren't the players urinating more after that game? It's a little gross, sorry, but quite an innovation and quite a business that sparked from it. Why aren't the players urinating more after the game? Thoughts? Samantha, spot on. You got it right away. Good job. That question was actually asked by a coach, and then the coach at the University of Florida started working with one of the doctors, scientists that worked right there at the university. That's how Gatorade. Last one, okay. What if a windshield could blink? What if a windshield could blink? What innovation would that have sparked? All right, so I've got a twist on this question. It most definitely is windshield wipers. That question was first asked in 1902, way back. But 60 years later, another question was asked, which was, why can't a windshield blink more like my eyes whenever they need to? So why can't a windshield blink more like whenever it needs to and not just sort of continually? What innovation? Okay, Andy, I like the guess. Maybe Mazda was doing this first. I'm not really sure. Rain-X, interesting. It was actually intermittent wipers, the ones where we can sort of tell it. You can go every so, not constantly, let's just go like every 15 seconds or every 30 seconds, whatever it is. Bob Kearns asked that question. There's actually a whole movie about it. He innovated this whole intermittent wiper thing. The movie's Flash of Genius, by the way, if you want to check it out. You got it, intermittent. There it is right there, Deborah. So businesses sparked by simple questions, you betcha. Innovation is there. So maybe the real question we all need to wrestle with today or deal with, everyone, is what are the right questions? And of course, how indeed do we ask them? Well, here's how I set it up. And it's the bottom line, most basic way you could set it up. And I want to build our conversation from there, from the foundation. When you're talking about using questions to drive innovation and even spark relationships and strengthen the relationships in your world, the most powerful questions, they have two things in common. And questions, all questions, aren't created equally. So that's an important first thought. Questions aren't created equally. There are two things that make a question powerful, two really simple things. The first one is they drive towards a solution. So the most powerful questions drive towards possible solutions. That's part one. Part two is they have a positive tone. In other words, or another way of saying they have appreciative inquiry. But just those two things, I want to talk about those two things and what those two things do that can make your question asking so powerful, because you all, I'm not sure where you're all coming from. Some of you might be using questions around a job search. You might be using questions around starting your own something, starting your own business, starting your own idea and innovation out there in the world. Or you might be using questions just to navigate the work and job and life that you have right now and how to make your relationships stronger, your interactions stronger, and how to do better work at the work you are doing. However you're using questions in your world today, those two things are where we're going to start. Again, the most powerful questions have to have leading to possible solutions, and they have to have a positive tone. In other words, appreciative inquiry. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I said we're going to start with the most basic framework we can have. The most powerful questions never stop at why. They lead to possible solutions. So no matter how you frame up innovative thinking, this fundamental line of reasoning is always going to be there. So this fundamental line of reasoning starts at why, and it moves to what if and how. Let me set it up this way around that Polaroid innovation that we were talking about. It started with, Dad, why do we have to wait for a picture? The what if that led to is, well, what if we could develop film instantly somehow? What if we could do that? The how on the end of that is, well, how would a camera and film need to change in order to accomplish that feat? Now, there are thousands of other questions that can and should be built off of that basic line of thinking and basic line of reasoning, but it really does all start with these three basic lines, these three basic steps, excuse me. It starts with why, then what if, then how. I challenge all of you to apply the same line of reasoning to any questions that you're using or working on right now to spark a new thought or new thinking. Another step that is often included when it comes to sparking innovation or thinking innovatively that's added to this three sort of basic ground level line of reasoning and line of thinking is the introduction of constraints on whatever solution you're working on. So that's really around that what if and how part. Adding constraints for that Polaroid problem might sound like this. How would a solution look if it were smaller than a loaf of bread? So there's a constraint. We're going to have to come up with a solution, but it has to be smaller than a loaf of bread, whatever it is. Can you imagine what kind of thinking that would have to sort of drive and force around the size, the technology, the use of all the chemicals and all the parts that would go together to make a Polaroid camera? Another example could be, well, how would we do that if there was no electrical outlet anywhere near us? Or what would it look like if it were going to be used by a child, for example? How simple would it need to be? How clear would its function need to be? All of those constraints can really be added to that basic line of reasoning to drive innovation. So For starters, step one, it has to lead to a possible solution. So it can't stop at why, it has to lead to the what ifs and the hows. The second thing I said was that it has to have appreciative inquiry or be framed in a positive light. Here's the most basic example of what that looks like. It's the difference between, oh no, what are we going to do? And what if this represents an opportunity for us? It might seem very, very simple, but how you frame the questions that you ask really, truly matters. One example of questions impacting our behavior in a major way goes beyond me just telling you, it's how you look at life. You look at life either as a get to or a have to, and more powerful questions come out if you're looking at life as a get to and not just a have to. And I hope you can see that identified right here in these this sort of simple demonstration. But another very cool sort of demonstration of the effects that the questions we ask have on behavior comes from a really cool study back in 1993. It's really from the field of behavioral psychology. It's called the mere measurement effect. And if I were to simplify it all the way down to the simplest I could make it, it would be that merely measuring or questioning something with a person or for a person will significantly influence or change their behavior, or significantly influence their behavior. So back in 1993, there was a huge study done where 40,000 people were simply asked whether or not they planned to purchase a car in the next 6 months. Right? It was a behavioral study, and actually against the test or against the control group, that test group who was asked about buying a car in the next 6 months had a 35% increase purchase rate with just by being asked. So the questions we ask others, they really do matter. They really do influence. But I want to pivot over then to a very important point that has to be said today as far as the questions we go. I think it came up in the chat a little while ago, and that was around the questions we ask ourselves. So someone said, maybe I only asked a few questions out loud, but I've asked myself a lot of questions. And it's this basic idea. Hang on to that appreciative inquiry and the why, what if, how setup, because the questions we ask ourselves really matter, and we don't often stop to think about them. I like to say that we live in the world of the questions we create, and that couldn't be more true about the questions we're asking ourselves. So really take an inventory of what questions have I been asking myself, and how are those questions framed? Are they framed around that positive influence, positive inquiry sort of way? Are they kind of around that what if and how questions? Or am I stuck on why? Or am I stuck saying, what am I going to do? Keep that thinking in mind. I see a couple of book recommendations coming through. So Matt, always appreciate those great book recommendations coming through. Thanks for that. I want to move us forward to sort of a one final step before we get into some actual looking at questions, thinking about questions. And here's where I want to take you is the idea of questions in the relationships we have, because really our life is built around relationships. One tendency that we as human beings have is we tend to subsegment those relationships into categories, like those are work relationships. Those are community relationships, and maybe those are more our family and friend relationships. But the truth of relationships is they all have remarkable similarities, and many of the walls we put up between them help us sort of categorize, but they don't really impact any of the fundamental truths about building and sustaining strong relationships. The truth is that questions play a very important role in building, sustaining, and strengthening the relationships that we have. So something that I want to sort of draw all your thinking and attention to is actually an example that comes from a movie. And this example might draw you to think about your work relationships, okay? But I think it's a true and good and strong example that goes for every relationship. It comes from the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. So if you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, I think it's rated R, so I'm not making any parental recommendations here. Don't show your kids. But it's at the very, very end of the movie, everyone. And it is all about when the main character, Jordan, has sort of gone through all these ups and downs in life and winds up as a teacher or a presenter in front of a group. And he approaches people in the front row and holds up the pen and says, "Sell me this pen." And it's really a trick question, because most of the salespeople that look at it start talking about the pen. They start telling you how great the pen is and how smooth it feels in your hand and how all the great things and wonderful things about the pen. But if they do that, they fail. They miss the point. The point that this great salesman is making is it's really about relationships. My relationship with a customer or someone else, and that customer's relationship with their need, and my ability to ask questions to understand that need and what that person values. So again, it's a very work salesy example, but it's so true about every other part of relationships. It's about the questions, and that's where it starts. Understanding what someone else values, understanding what someone else needs, and how you can contribute value to that need. So questions drive a lot of what we do at Human Works 8. I'm hoping you're all open to and interested in, would you like to see some of our favorite questions as far as engaging leaders, engaging clients, about helping them grow and be more successful? Hopefully you're open to that, because here we go. I'm going to dive in. Here's my plan, everyone. I'm going to show you quickly top 10 categories, a couple examples under each, and then ask Sarah to share a document with you, and then we'll break out into groups where you can sort of talk with others here about what those questions might be, where those questions might add value and how you can use them. So let me jump into first some questions for you. Here's one of our favorite questions around discovering someone else's vision for the future. So it's a very relational focused question. It's what needs to happen in the next year for you to say that you were successful. It's all about understanding what someone else is setting up as a success criteria. And what I love about this question is it really does sort of allude to something very important. This question really does say, there is a future, and there's something you can do to make it a success. So I love the implication behind the question. We use this question a lot around initiating relationships and getting things started that way and understanding that need and that value. Let's talk about a question that surrounds having stronger teams. We use this question around building stronger teams. Who has a unique ability that could help on this project? I often ask clients or people I'm working with that question because I want them to think beyond title. Notice this isn't about title or role. I just want them to think about people and the strengths they bring to the table. So think well about people. I love that part of this question. It's getting anybody from this organization or anyone from this group involved who we think brings something to the table that can really be used and add value. Here are a couple interview questions that we really love to use. At the beginning of the interview, we ask the really short one, why this, why now? I love that question about kicking off, because imagine what doors that opens up for answers to that question when you're leading an interview. You could hear a lot about where that person's been coming from, what motivates and drives them to be seeking something new and different. So the why this, why now question is powerful. And at the end of an interview, always like to ask about things that would help jumpstart our working relationship that maybe haven't been shared yet. So those are questions that I love that get going that way. One thing to know just about the way human being sort of work and how our mind work is, the parts of our brain that relate to pleasure and reward are more active when we're asked an opinion question. So that last question is really an opinion question. What do you think would be very important that would jumpstart this working relationship in a really positive way? When it comes to working with someone else side by side and doing projects, here are two questions we really love to use around projects. What is the ideal outcome? What must be true when this project is finished? I call this a success criteria question. This is all about setting it up for success and getting out on the table early on what needs to be true when we're done. Hey, what needs to be there? What should it look like? And then, of course, these two sort of challenge questions around what's the greatest result we can get in the shortest amount of time and the greatest result with the least amount of effort, just to frame up and help prioritize what's being worked on right now. Those are great challenges to bring into a project conversation. I hope you can find some value in those for you. We often work with clients around some fundamental things when it comes to their purpose and what they do as a business. So why do you exist is a really basic question, but that second question can really elicit some really wonderful responses. What business are you really in? Imagine sort of how that could turn, or what someone could really say when you say, well, what business are you really in? What are people really looking to you for value? So that's really what the last question is. What do your customers really value most? You can learn a lot about someone or their business or what they're working on using that question. When coaching as a leader or as coaching anyone, we love this short, simple question to really get in deep around the work that they're doing. Is this your best work? Imagine what that could open up. Some people think that can sound a little sharp, a little harsh. Someone asked me the last time I was talking with questions about it that said, could you say, do you think this is your best work? I said, yeah, that would soften it a little bit. I think either questions are really powerful to set up a conversation around performance and the results that that person is achieving right now with the approaches that they're taking. I love this question as far as stop, check in, make sure we understand the why. And if anybody is a big supporter of knowing the why or starting with the why, here's a powerful why question. Why are we doing this? Make sure everybody's on the same page all the time. And here's another powerful question. Maybe it exposes a little vulnerability. Do you mind if we start over? I think that's a powerful question to share or ask or use if you see someone maybe stumbling, maybe struggling, and it's also an opportunity to ask for that if you need it or offer that if you think someone else does. Couple more. So what questions haven't I asked that I should be asking is another wonderful check-in with someone to make sure everything important is out on the table. And last but not least, this question, what's the most important thing that we should be discussing today is another priority sort of focused question. Those are some of our favorite 10, but we have many other favorites. In fact, I'm going to ask Sarah, if you have that link to send across to everybody who's on the call, if you could put that into the chat, everyone, there should be in the chat for you a link to not only these first 10, but some of these other favorites that I'm sharing on the screen right now. I want to invite you all to click that link because what I'm going to ask for is about 6 or 7 minutes to take us right up to that 55 before the hour. Andy, if you're willing to get us into those breakout groups of 3 or 4, just to send everyone off in a direction that would allow us all to talk about any of the questions we heard today and where we think we can use any of those questions valuably or with some value in our world today.
All right, breakout rooms are all queued up. Are we ready to go, AJ?
I'm ready when you are.
Here we go. So it looks like most everyone who is going to join has joined at this point. So just give me a shout when you'd like me to release those rooms.
For sure. I'm just perusing the rooms and who's in what. I think we'll give them till maybe like 54. I want a chance for anyone who has something to share to be able to share it and then just close strong. So hear reactions from the room. I have a quote to finish and I'll throw my contact information up if anyone wants to reach out.
Wonderful.
thanks so much for doing the last minute organization on a breakout room. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Andy, if you have a 30 or 60-second countdown timer, I think it'd probably be wise to start that and just start inviting people back, see where they went.
Sure. So at 30 seconds, invite them back.
That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I know some folks are just popping back in. So welcome back, everyone. We'll give everybody else their 20 more seconds to finish their thoughts, and then we'll keep going. As you're waiting for everything to start back up or everyone to be back, I'm going to be asking for reactions, thoughts, questions that were valuable to you that you think you can pick this up, take it over to this circumstance or situation and use. Okay, I think we pulled everybody back in. Our timer expired. So just looking for a first reaction, something you talked about in this breakout room that you had, where what I'm really looking to do is highlight a question that you saw that I could use that somewhere. Anyone want to start that conversation or have a thought or idea to share? And some may be typing that thought or idea to share. So I'll give a second for people to react to that. One question you thought you could take and use.
I really liked the, do you mind if we start over? because sometimes I jump in too fast.
Fantastic. So you think you can use that? What situation in the world, or maybe it's you're saying I can use it everywhere in life, AJ.
Yep,
So
everywhere.
got it.
My processing speed is way too fast in my head compared to my just general population.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah. Thank you, Leona. I know I've needed that question in my life. So sometimes it takes a little bravery, but you got to ask it, and others will understand. Other questions that you took or you heard someone else say in your group, this is a really powerful question. I think I could use it here. Lynn, just taking a look at your chat message that came through, just seeing that now. Yeah, that question about who has the ability to help with this? Look past all the formalities of role, of job description. Sometimes it's most powerful to say, who's the someone who can help here based on what they've got, what they bring to the table? Amanda, thanks. I'm just taking a look at your comment here in the chat. Need a word frame questions differently based on, for sure. Know your audience. Yeah, I kind of brought that up around, is this your best work, or do you think this is your best work? A couple words or questions could change that question depending on the audience, for sure. Good. Well, everyone, I hope you all found some value in that question sheet. Take it, own it, use it, steal all those questions and put them to work in your world, in your life. I hope that, yep, Lori, with job interviews, with any other situation, whether starting something new, doing some innovative thinking about an idea that you've been working on, or maybe it's something you want to build someday into something else, your own small business, that some of this line of questioning you can bring into that process to strengthen and grow your own relationships, your own thinking, your own idea or innovation. I want to share one final quote as far as that goes. But first, I want to make sure, Lori, if that's a question, I want to make sure, oh, you're quoting a question. Got it. Thanks for sharing that. Here's the quote I want to share with all of you. So it sort of comes from that book that I showed you before, A More Beautiful Question, but there's a great quote that I love by E.E. Cummings. Always the beautiful answer who asks a more beautiful question. Yep, it's about asking powerful questions, everyone. So I encourage you all to think about not only the questions you're asking others, but the questions you're asking yourself. And of course, if you want to stay in touch or get in touch, there's my email address. Feel free to reach out if you have a thought or you want to talk. AJ@humanworksite.com. I think the QR code that's there might send you to our newsletter. So if that's something of interest to you, you've got it. There it is. And I'm actually going to take it away in just one quick second here. So, but would love to stay in touch with anyone who has questions, thoughts that they want to ask. I'll kick it back though over to you, Andy, to wrap us all up.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, still a little bit of time here to get some last minute questions in if any of you had some on your mind. I wanted to go ahead and thank you all though for taking time out of your day to join us here. I mentioned some links at the beginning about upcoming events that we have, which is that link right there at DreamBank. You know, this happens to fall under our career series. We have 9 distinct event series at DreamBank though. I manage our career and our small business series. We also cover learning labs, which is a how-to or a 101. We host events in Spanish, family related activities, all sorts of different stuff. We cast a very wide net. So take a peek at that upcoming links or upcoming events link right there. And then I also wanted to post a link to our YouTube page as well. This is a great concise list of all of our past events that we have done and streamed, or a good chunk of them, I should say. We put them up there. So if you want to go ahead and dig through and look at some of our past events, another great resource, AJ's on there as well too. So you can go back and watch some other events that AJ has appeared on as well. You know, there was a question that came through from Deborah here stating, how can we train ourselves to be better askers, question askers?
I love the question. Thanks for asking it. Here's what I would do, Deborah. If you ever build a to-do list, as far as that goes, if you build your day around to do, you know, sort of list out, hey, these are my priorities today. Here's what I have to get done this week. Whatever. Start framing everything you have to do as a question. That's how I think you can train yourself to be a better question answer. So turn your to-do list into a list of questions. It might sound like, how can I get that person to respond to my email, or how can I get this accomplished? Frame every single to-do on your to-do list around a question. That's one of the best ways I think you can put your goals, your to-do list around quotes. That's the best way to train yourself to do that. Thanks so much for asking that question. I love it.
All righty. So yeah, that looks like all the questions that have come in. Again, thank you all. Thank you, AJ, for putting together such a great presentation. We will go ahead and cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.